Incremental games are weird. And I'm not just talking about Tingus Goose, where you earn money by repeatedly kicking babies puked out of some deformed geese. I'm talking about incremental games in general. They're typically very simple, repetitive, and either look like a gamified spreadsheet or someone's first attempt at making a video game. And perhaps because of that, some people don't even see them as real games, let alone play them. And yet the genre grows steadily, and more games are being developed each year. There were more incrementals released in the first half of 2026 than in the entire prior year. Sure, skeptics would say that it's not just incrementals, but games as a whole follow this trend. And even then, it's not necessarily a good thing. It could be that there are just more shitty asset flips and AI atrocities flooding the storefront now. But even looking at exclusively very positive games, the pattern is the same. Heck, one of the incrementals was even showcased at the Summer Game Fest as one of the 14 games that sold over 1 million units by that time. Kind of crazy for not a real game to be there. But if they're being sold, someone's buying, and it's not just me. But why? What is their appeal? Why are they so popular nowadays? And most importantly, what the fuck are incremental games? My best definition for an incremental is that it's a very gameplay-light experience that focuses on making sure that the player is constantly making steady progress, which is represented in the increase of some number or virtual currency. Don't confuse it with high scores in arcade games, as keywords here are steady progress, as in you don't lose it upon failure. In fact, very few incrementals even have a fail state, as it would be antithetical to their core principle: numbers going up. Unlike incrementals, arcade games or roguelikes completely reset your progress on the loss, and the long-term progression comes strictly from the refinement of player skill and better understanding of game's mechanics over time. Roguelites, on the other hand, are somewhere in between, keeping varied degrees of meta progression between runs to avoid inadvertently scaring off their more modern, casual player base. So, why am I talking about roguelites in a video about incremental games? Well, because these genres are kind of tangential. If we try to represent them on an axis of the importance of meta progression, roguelites would fit in between roguelikes, that have none of it, and incrementals, that rely almost entirely on it. The extent of exactly how much progression matters, as opposed to player skill, varies with each game. And while it's easy to classify titles that are firmly in their own cluster, I think it's more interesting to look at the space between. Just how much does a roguelite have to rely on meta progression in order to be seen as an incremental? Where exactly do we draw the line? Astra Prospector is one of the games that is close to a border between these genres. It genuinely requires a fair share of mechanical skill to complete some of its harder levels, even after unlocking everything there is on the skill tree. Yet, the grindy beginning that forces you to retry the same level until you're strong enough to tackle the next undeniably makes it an incremental. Though plenty of roguelites have a habit of doing the same thing, but I feel like it's different here. I guess the extent of the grind is what's important? I'm not entirely sure. Outhold is another such example. You fail the first level a few times, getting a bit of a resource in the process, and with that resource you slowly unlock upgrades that let you perform better and hopefully move on to the next level, where a similar loop is repeated. But eventually you'll get to a point where you can't just get another upgrade, and you're forced to make do with what you have, turning into an actual, quite challenging strategy. Hold up, strategy? Weren't we talking about roguelikes and stuff? How does it tie into that, you might ask? I've got one word for you: prestige. Well, to be fair, it doesn't explain anything on its own, but we still gotta talk about it. Prestige is but a fancy word for meta progression. The distinction comes from the fact that, well, there's no need for anything to persist between runs if there's never any risk in losing. And so the player was given an option to effectively commit seppuku voluntarily, in exchange for persistent upgrades, also known as prestige. Even though the term is much older, it was popularized by, believe it or not, Call of Duty. So yeah, incremental games have ties even with shooters. But the idea behind prestiging is solid. When the progress gets too slow, players have a choice of starting over with extra perks that would speed up their journey right back, but also allow them to progress further at a faster rate. The game benefits from being able to recycle content effectively, and the player doesn't suffer either, as being able to rush through parts that previously took you a long time can be quite enjoyable as well. But the most interesting part about Prestige is that it's a choice. It's up to the player whether to do it and when. And together with decisions over the priority of upgrades on skill trees, it becomes quite a complex optimization problem. And that's exactly what incremental games are. Optimization problems, albeit implicit. Unlike full-blown automation games that explicitly demand you achieve certain throughputs, incremental games let you pick your own pace. But due to the sheer simplicity of their gameplay, the optimization problem becomes the main focus. It doesn't matter if you're actively trying to speedrun an incremental or just relaxing after a hard day, whether you want it or not, the hook of these games becomes a chase after efficiency. And the beauty is that as long as you'll give it a shot, you'll get there your own way. I've said the word incremental 18 times in this video by now, but in my defense, that is the most accurate term to describe the games I'm talking about. Yet, believe it or not, the tag for incremental games was added on Steam just earlier this year. Prior to that, all of the aforementioned games were labeled as clickers and idlers, despite the fact that the majority of them were neither. Idlers and clickers are the precursors of incrementals, but over time people realized that there's only so much you can do with endless clicking and waiting, and so the genre expanded beyond that. But that isn't to say that new idle games are not being made anymore. It's just that nowadays it's more common to encounter what I call a turbo idler, where players' actions are still strictly limited to decision making, but the wait time is drastically reduced to a point that you can typically play the entire thing in one sitting without going insane. Another modern kind of incrementals are the gamified chores. It's not that these games are chores, but rather that they take some repetitive task and turn it into a fun experience by empowering the player through upgrades, going from manually sorting thousands of books in a thrashed library to being able to cast a spell to do most of the work for you, from slowly picking up leaves one by one to being able to just blow everything away into the drain. That can't be a good idea now that I think about it, but the progression feels great. Finally, the most common type of incremental nowadays is the minigame kind, in which the game is split into two distinct phases, the minigame and the upgrade phase. Play the minigame, get some resource, upgrade, which lets you play the minigame better and get more resource. It's a very straightforward system that is not that difficult to make, which is why there are so many of these games. At their worst, they can be uninspired clones of what came before them, but that isn't to say that they can't be fun. I've enjoyed Astra Prospector and Outhold that I've mentioned earlier, but my favorite is probably good old Dixium. It just has this charm about it. You know it was made with passion, unlike hundreds of samey experiences that all have lo-fi beats to increment to type of music for some reason. Another commonality is that the minigames suck, kind of by design. Look at Cauldron as an example. It is a bit of a special case, since it has multiple minigames rather than just one, but the idea is still the same. The minigames in Cauldron are absolutely dogshit. They are terrible. So much so that you actually want to do better at them, so that your passive income is higher, so that you don't have to interface with them as much. Isn't that crazy? The shittiness of the minigames ends up elevating the significance of upgrade progression. It's not like that for all minigame incrementals, but it's undeniable that out of the two phases, the one that truly matters is the decision-making one. And that is kind of the main point of incremental games, and to some extent, even all of the surrounding genres. Making interesting choices and seeing their impact on the gameplay is the key. Just like with Vampire Survivors that blew up in popularity for the same reasons, incremental games strip away everything that is extra and only focus on what's important. And I think that some people are just not ready for it yet. They say that incrementals trick your brain into releasing dopamine by making you feel like you're doing something productive, making progress on something worthwhile, when in reality, it's quite the opposite and you're just wasting your time in front of the screen. But the harsh truth is that it applies to all of the video games. It's all fake. It's just that incrementals don't try to hide this fact. You get exactly what you see here and there's no deception going on. unlike with modern AAA games that disguise massive to-do lists as immersive open-world points of interest. And you can see the effect of that in user reviews. For all of the numerous flaws and shortcomings of incrementals, people are surprisingly content and understanding, which just goes to show that they're not that bad after all. The genre, fittingly to its name, is only growing. The potential is very high. And my only hope is that instead of copying one another, more games would experiment with some ideas of their own. Because for me, this is where they truly shine. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts on this topic or want to share some of your favorite incremental games, please do so in the comments. Would really appreciate that. Once again, thank you, and have a good one. Peace.